Good morning and welcome to this session. I think that one of the things that I like about these meetings is the range of topics that are addressed in these sessions and in the side discussions afterwards. And this panel is a little different than we've spent a lot of time over these few days talking about how we collect data and what data we collect. This panel really addresses the issue of who collects that data. So in building a statistical system, the question of who is just as important as the question of what and how. And so I think INEGI was fairly unique in some ways in being a national statistical agency that moved into the business of collecting data on crime. So I think there are debates about what the role of national statistical agencies should be, whether data on crime should be collected by, I think Jan van Dijk in an earlier session talked about groups of experts that were outside of the government. In other instances, you have situations where the collection of crime statistics is located in the Department of Justice, or and then other places where it's located in the National Statistical Agency. So there are pros and cons to these positionings of who collects the data. And in this session, we want to take a look at some of the variety of arrangements and activities that are being pursued throughout the region and in other continents as well about the involvement of national statistical agencies in the collection of data on crime and justice. To do this, we have a very distinguished panel, I think, of people who have tremendous amount of experience and activity in this area. And I'll start on my left. I'll introduce the panel members, and then they will make their presentation, and then we'll answer questions after all the speakers have finished their presentation, I think. So let me first introduce Annabel Sanchez, who is from the chief of the National Statistical Institute for Statistics and Informatics in Peru. He's an economist with a PhD in economics from the National Superior University of San Marcos. He also has a master's degree in economics with mention in political economy. And so welcome here. I think our second speaker is Veronica Cusco. She's from the National Statistics and Census Institute, and she is head of their database construction unit. And so she was the and she's responsible for generating security crime statistics. I think that, and then to my right is, she allowed me to call her Juicy because I couldn't handle her first name, is Giuseppina Muratore from Italy, who's a sociologist and a PhD in methodology and social science, and she works for the National Statistical Agency in Italy. And last but not least is Mario Palma. Mario is Vice President of the Board of Governors of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography in INEGI. He holds the rank of Vice Minister, State Minister, and is in charge of the subsystems of government, public security, and justice information. And so Mr. Palma has a degree in law and from the National Autonomous University of Mexico and an LLM from the London School of Economics. So you can see we have a very prestigious group who knows from what they speak. And I think we'll begin with the order that we have in the program, which is Annabel. Si quiere.
Good morning. Well, first of all, let me express my gratitude for having been invited as a representative of Peru in this event. Also, let me thank INEGI, the Center of Excellence, and also the UNODC office. Now, I will share with you the statistics of crime and citizens' security, and these are the contents of my presentation. And as you are well aware, the National Statistical Offices, and in particular INEI in Peru, we are highly committed in generating statistical information. And the INEI is the ruling entity of the statistical activities and standardizes our statistical functions in creating demographic, social, and economic, environmental, and basically those statistics regarding crime and justice. So therefore, this particular area is a core issue for all of us at a moment where within the country, in particular, the main problems that citizens identify are precisely regarding the growing expressions of crime as one of the core areas in citizens' perception. The second element is held by corruption, which was present during the last administration, and the lack of citizen security, which is expressed in the household surveys, that has a chapter with issues of governance, the perception of the citizens regarding different areas. Now, these problems are way ahead of other problems such as poverty, unemployment, or the lack of jobs, and it becomes, crime becomes the main citizens' concern in Peru. This is why there is a growing demand for statistical info in this regard, and this is why the different statistical offices within the country and the different sectors and basically the ruling entity in the area of generating information. We need to know the level, the magnitude, the distribution of this phenomenon. We have to understand the demographic features, social and economic, that have to do with the victim and the victim area or the perpetrator. We need to understand also the characteristics of the juvenile offenders in the criminal law. This has been an increasing trend in the country, and also the characteristics of domestic family within the households where there is a great presence of criminal actions, and also the elements of the criminal offenses, and this important element of trying to achieve quantitative elements of measuring the trackability within the criminal justice system in our country. This is why we have appealed to different sources of information that we have available. And in particular, within our own function, we have to carry out census, the household surveys, and also to standardize and take advantage of the administrative records with statistical purposes. Now, within this problem, and throughout the last years, we have been supporting with information to the Ministry of Justice and Finances and to the Ministry of the Interior a whole cluster and battery of indicators that follow up different budgetary programs that are regarding national security and also areas that have to do with the national census of commissariats. We actually check every year all the law enforcement agencies within the whole country, and this is where we collect information regarding infrastructure, human resources of the different equipment within these different municipalities, also the local states, and basically with all the law enforcement agencies at the local sphere. So throughout the last 3 years, we have now a national record of crimes and misdemeanors within these commissariat offices. They are allowing us to generate information that allow us to overcome a series of limitations and deficiencies that records do have. So in itself, this is a very important step that we're taking in coordination with the Ministry of the Interior together with these commissariats. And this has led us to create a census of violent deaths in all of the police agencies. And from these results, we managed to record the basic information in order to estimate the homicide indexes for the different geographical environments in the country. We also have conducted, basically last year, the planning of a national penitentiary census. And this year, 2016, we have carried out in all of the penitentiary centers in Peru a national census of penitentiary population, which will allow us to characterize those people that, given A or B circumstances, influenced by different social, economic circumstances, have fallen into the areas of crime, and they are inmates in the rehabilitation centers or the prison centers. Now, within the youth centers, we have a diagnosis of rehabilitation. It is quite important to look at this segment of people under 18 years of age that have fallen into criminal activities. Now, in the area of the household surveys, we have a whole battery of surveys that are connected, directed to measure these phenomena. And in particular, there is a multi-purpose survey, a major multi-purpose survey, which is conducted by INEI in Peru, that has a module of citizens security, where we are measuring victimization indexes, perception of insecurity, types of crime. And in being a module, it does have limitations, but nevertheless, we're obtaining figures that allow us to see the levels of crime within the country. Within 2013 and 2015, we have also carried out a national survey of social interactions or relations that is directed to identify violence against women that is shown in sexual, psychological, physical violence that takes place within the household, perpetrated by their partners. Now, also a survey for boys, girls, and adolescents, where on the one hand, we also see areas such as bullying, violence within the households, and also in terms of adolescents, physical, sexual, and psychological violence. And in parallel to all of this, we have the National Demographic and Family Health Survey. We have a module of violence perpetrated against women, which is a yearly series that is showing us what is exactly happening with this particular action that is, of course, impacting a very large number of women in the country. Now, at this point, I would like to relate to you that we have been planning this national specialized survey regarding victimization, and the pattern of this is the regional survey that has been tested with a general questionnaire, and the pilot test in Peru is precisely being implemented throughout this month, so we can obtain the necessary resources to carry out this survey for the first time in the whole country. Once we will be allocated the necessary resources. But the core task lies within the fact of standardizing, homogenizing the administrative resources and its use. That's why our work with the judicial and police records, the penitentiary statistics, the records of detainees, those that have been convicted, human trafficking, that are issues that have to do with the commissariats, or money laundering, is one of our challenges, because the administrative challenges are showing us a problem that we need to tackle. We have a series of problems within our administrative records, and we have to work them jointly. You know, geographic, non-common environments, differences in the term of the records, absence of standards of definitions, codings, and procedures, and there is a limited use of statistics of crime for decision-making processes that do come from these records. There is also a weak institutionality within the statistical sectorial offices, and the flows of information are not uniform, infrastructure which is inadequate, and also the lack of information systems that have to be fully integrated. All of these problems, we have to approach them in a coordinated manner. That is one of the main areas that we are fully committing ourselves to achieve. In 2013, we finally integrated as a country a core element, which is the Interinstitutional Statistical Committee of Crime, which is concentrating representatives of the National Police in Peru, the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Justice, the Public Prosecutor, the Judicial Branch, the National Penitentiary Institute, in such a way that we can work in a coordinated manner in order to be able to overcome the deficiencies regarding records and to have quality data and a flow of data that will help us to show in a quantitative manner the features of this phenomenon. This committee is even expanded into an area which is having an intervention of additional institutions where we have the Health Ministry, the Economic Ministry, the Transportation Ministry, Women's Ministry, the Ministry of Social Inclusion and Development. All of these institutions that somehow have to do with this phenomenon. Now, this coordination area is well anchored in the current Peruvian standards, and with the National Institute of Information and Statistics is the coordinating entity promoting standards, and all of this in order to support all these higher instances, such as the National Council of Criminal Policy, which will be using the information, the National Board of Citizen Security, and it feeds at the same time with information the different observatories which are present throughout the country. Now, some figures that we have been reporting permanently. First of all, the Victimization Index. At this time, it is impacting a third of the Peruvian population, about 15 years of age, and that allows us also to differentiate this by geographical areas in the country. Yet, the insecurity perception is almost 3 times higher than the Victimization Index in Peru. We also have dark figures, or the hidden figures as we call them, and only 14% of the Peruvian citizens that have been victims of a criminal action will report this crime. And, for different reasons, they do not know who the criminal is, they consider this a waste of time, because it's a minor crime, they have no trust within the government officials, because the fact did not fully take place. So this is in comparison with a very high level of lack of reporting crimes. In violent deaths area, we have taken an important step forward in regards to the fact of being able to standardize our estimates of the homicide index through a national recount of violent deaths as a result of criminal intentional actions. Given the fact that the figures that previously were elaborated, disseminated by the public prosecutors, by the national police, lacked certain characteristics that would provide them with quality and would be distorting what was happening within reality. So within a joint work, we have conducted this violent death census, and through this we're estimating the homicide index in the country, which is close to 7 deaths per every 100,000 inhabitants. And the most relevant thing is we are able to look at the geographic spots where these figures are far higher. There are cities in the country where the index can reach 35 deaths per every 100,000 inhabitants, and even lower indexes in other places, as you may see here on this Peruvian map on the screen. Now, also, we are in a coordinated way acting with the Ministry of the Interior and the different law enforcement agencies, creating a national record of all the reported crimes presented before the law enforcement agencies in the country. Now, this has to do with a criminal code that allows us to see that the frequency of criminal actions is highly concentrated in the property crimes. This allows to have a geographic identification of this phenomenon, its levels at the state, district, and municipality presence, the statistics within the prison centers that give us a vision of the inmates' population within the prison centers, and this census will help us to have a more integrated vision, qualitative vision of those people that have fallen into some kind of a criminal activity. What do we want to achieve ahead of us? We are dedicated to improve the statistics of crime and citizen security within our country. We are setting a strategic plan to improve the outcomes of these statistics. We're promoting the implementation of these new victimization survey to make it a large sample of the country. We're carrying out the pilot testing right now, so we have to adopt and adapt the international classification of crimes with statistical purposes, recently adopted by the UN. and also how this corresponds with the criminal Peruvian code, to have a guideline with an integrated system of statistics and crime in Peru. This is to have a main place where we would record the census data, the surveys, the records, and that will allow us to identify all these actions with a single identification of the characteristics of the victim, the perpetrator, the offender, the criminal justice system, and all of this in a GIS system, and other indicators that will explain to us the phenomenology of what is happening throughout the country. This manual, which we are promoting in Peru, will allow us to have a conceptual common framework, to standardize the record of information, and to have systematized statistics to achieve the trackability of criminal actions, and obviously, with all of this, to have consistency in how to validate the figures. This will facilitate to have geographic common environments. This will allow us to have data that will be fully coded, and to have a greater coordination within the information, and also have friendly consultations. This is a system with two modules, a consulting module and a module of recording the information and incorporation of the information within the system. This system that will be within the web will be available in the whole country. We will be recording how frequently crimes take place, all the household surveys, and yet at the same time all of the information of all the institutions that you may see. And having this, we will be able to have a permanent follow-up within time, within the records of the committance of crimes, the statistics that will allow us to have place this within graphs, place this within a geographic environment, coordinate this and with the victimization indexes at the departmental level, and where are these concentrating, in which department in the country we have higher levels of victimization. For example, in the southern department of Peru, which is the metropolitan Lima, Cusco, Paco, other areas. We can also go down to certain polygons. In the case of Lima, we can interact all of this with the records of reported crimes. You can see on the one hand the records of reported crimes within the police agencies, and on the other one we have the indexes and levels of victimization. This provides us with a full picture to understand what is happening with this phenomenon, and through this we can assist the government officials in their planning their operations, and also we are within this system trying to correlate the information that is quantitative of the criminal actions with the economic, social information, with the population records, with the business records. So this will allow us to have an exploratory and descriptive and correlated analysis. This means that it will help all the different institutions throughout a process of a core problem, which we are now having in Peru and living throughout Peru. We also have an angle where we will have all the publications available. You can consult them permanently from the electronic website. This, in summary, is the presentation of the system, what we are working over in Peru. And to conclude, I would like to share with you that this module is trying to collect the data of the fact, the crime, the victim, and also how we are dealing with this phenomenon. This is the presentation I wanted to share with you, and to share with you the steps forward and how we are working in Peru in order to consider with quality figures this particular problem that certainly calls for all of the attention of the Peruvian government officials. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annabel. That was a very ambitious plan. It looks marvelous, actually. And now Veronica will tell us about Ecuador.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation on behalf of Ecuador from Dr. Jose Rosero, the National Institute of Statistics and Geography, INEGI, UNODC, and CLEAR for this invitation to Ecuador to be able to participate in this high-level conference. I want to show you issues. This presentation is divided into three parts. First of all, I will explain what the Statistical Office has done in Ecuador in generating data on justice and crime. Secondly, I will explain what Ecuador has done in INEC. The INEC is the National Institute of Statistical and Census. Why statistics are important? Throughout history, and right now, many times, we tend to see statistics as cold figures or just limited to databases, but this importance goes beyond just cold databases. They are evidence on which public policies are made. They help us to identify the needs, to set up goals, and to monitor the progress in several issues. Then, for public policymakers, they can learn from their mistakes, and the citizen will be able then to ask for accountability of the authorities. They are a basic pillar of a democracy and equality development. I want to tell you the INEC has almost 40 years, and from the beginning we have centered in the traditional role of producing data, census and surveys, actualization of mapping, but after 2013 in INEC we have a historical change in structure, and we go beyond production and become to be the rector entity of the national statistics. This is a function of planning of national statistics, regulation of statistical production, and the control and quality assurance. In production, we're moving toward the strengthening of administrative records. Ecuador opens a historical page in performing census through administrative records. We have a first experience in Galapagos province. This place has been selected as a unique lab or single lab because of its geographical and administrative structure. It's easier to verify data. We don't have to wait a decade to have real statistics, but we have a methodology based on updated information. Today, Ecuador is facing this new challenge of census through administrative records. It's a pioneer in the region. INEC also is in charge of analysis and investigation of information. We are going to be users for research and analysis of our own information. It centers in metrics that allow to study good living, which is access in our constitution. We also perform specialized studies, and we have innovation in statistical research methods. Now, what do we achieve with this? We are focused on two roles. On one hand, we want to have info for national planning and official information for public policy generating institutions. The three aspects go hand in hand, and we have technical independence, quality, transparency, access, and opportunity. What has Ecuador done under the coordination of INEC for crime statistics? INEC can make up statistical commissions in order to improve the quality of information in any sphere. So we institutionalize the protection of data on crime and justice by creating special statistical commissions. Basically, these are auxiliary bodies that provide advice to INEC, and they're made up according to the case, maybe by representatives of producing institutions or representatives of statistics users. The idea is to have an homologation of the calculation methodology, to close gaps in information, and to propose improvement to statistical production to be used for national planning purposes. May 10, 2010, we have the creation of Special Commission of Citizen Safety and Justice Statistics. We also have statistics on market, on education. This commission was created in order to coordinate and standardize methodology for the production of official information in order to create a systemic and transparent tool for a proper design, implementation, and evaluation of public policies. It is made up by 10 agencies. We have the Ministry for the Coordination of Safety, chairing the commission. Then we have INEC, the Ministry of the Interior, the National Policy, the General Attorney's Office, the Ministry of Justice, Human Rights, and they have the National Secretary of Planification, Transit, Defense, Armed Forces, the Judiciary Council, and the Observatory of Citizen Security. Though these are the institutions in charge of making public policy to guarantee the citizen security in Ecuador. So that's why they make up the Special Commission. Now let's see which was the situation of statistics on citizen safety and justice. The first step is the creation of the commission, but we perform an evaluation to see how are the figures in each situation. We find that there is no methodological process guaranteeing quality, timely, and reliable information. We have identified that several actors were producing information in a very isolated manner. On one hand, we have from the prosecutor's office that were different from data presented by the police. There were no manuals and classification of crime. There was a weakness in the process of information entering and the use of low technified tools to handle the databases. So we had to put together in just one system the statistical information about citizen safety. So the president will mandate INEC to coordinate the process to have certain precise figures and indicators. These are some activities of the Commission. It's created in 2010, then a working group is made up for the analysis of citizen safety justice statistics. Manuals are created to standardize processes and concepts of report records. There is an agreement of interinstitutional cooperation that allowed us to carry out the survey of security citizen, and now we can have a figure, just one set of figures at the level of the country. We no longer have different figures from different institutions. We have just one set of figures for homicides and other statistics. Then the manual for classification of crime is created. A technical subcommittee for validation is created at the same institution belonging to the Commission, but now we have only 5 agencies. They validate every month the supervision of quality and the figure produced by the prosecutor's office about homicides and killings. And currently, we still work together to improve the quality of statistical operation of the security sector. So these are the products of the Commission. In this joint effort of all institutions, now we have a module for victimization and perception of insecurity. This is together with the employment survey that is done every quarter. It is not the best instrument that would allow us to measure crime, but still will give us some information to have a permanent follow-up to see the trend of victimization of Ecuadorian households. Also, we have a survey of victimization and perception of insecurity of 2011 and a strengthening of administrative records from different agencies such as the police. Then we developed an updated conceptual and methodology manuals of the security sector. In August 2014, Ecuador had a change in the criminal code, and so that's why a manual was created to disaggregate the type of crime. Now, then we had the development and homologation of indicators and the certification of quality for the statistics operations. We are convinced that the correct decision-making is based on the availability of timely statistics that will allow to design, develop, and monitor public policies. So INEC, that is the main entity of the statistical national system, is in charge of generating standards based on good practices and fundamental principles, and to carry out action to guarantee the enforcement of the standards and provide support in order to cover compliance gaps. So among the objectives of the National Statistical Program, we have to set up and to update the inventory of operations in statistics. This inventory is a tool of planning and permanent updating that must be modified in view of the availability of statistical data and indicators and statistical information for decision-making purposes and for the assessment of public policies. For justice and crime, we have mapped 10 statistical operations: the survey of victimization and perception security, statistics of judicial production, statistics of judicial staff, which is in charge of the judiciary board, fiscal statistics in charge of the general attorney's office, statistics of the public defenders, statistics for centers of incarceration in charge of the Ministry of Justice and Human Rights, statistics of homicides and death, statistics of human being traffic and migrant traffic. Now, we have another objective of the National Statistical Program, which is to define the official nature of statistics by means of the quality certification system. This system does the following: the analysis of quality of the process of statistical production in order to strengthen the quality of basic statistics, census, surveys, and those statistics based on official records. It is working under the Law of Statistics, Decree 77, and the National Statistical Program. The idea is to improve the process of statistical production, to increase the use of official statistics, and to promote the statistics culture. So we analyze the compliance of the Code of Good Statistical Practices and the compliance with the model of statistical production. All of the operations that are mapped within the inventory are going to be prioritized, and they have to go through the system. Quickly, the stages are 5. The first, we go through the preparation, we prioritize the statistical operation, then we have data gathering, the quality analysis, certification with the intervention of certification committee that will assign the degree of quality to statistical operation, and then we have a plan for improvement and comprehensive follow-up. This is done by INEC. Who performed the analysis? For the national statistical system, we have an expert according to the statistical operation, and then you have by INEC and statistical process analyst. For the case of statistical operation of INEC, well, we have to resort to external experts for the three areas of the process: in statistical process, statistical production, and we also work with the basic team of INEC in charge of coordination and support in the implementation as well as the follow-up. We have several quality degrees, A, B, and C, with 4, 3, and 2 years, being in 4. After this time, they will have also go again through the certification process to make sure that the plan for improvement of operation has been implemented. The statistical operation of the security sector with quality certification is the following. Last year we had again support of UNODC and INEGI with a team expert for the certification of homicide statistics of the prosecutor's office system, that they have information about reports and different crimes, statistics of incarceration centers, and the three operations that are already mapped in inventory. They received their quality certification for 2 years. They already have their improvement plan and 1 more year for implementing the plan. Here, INEC will provide a follow-up to the implementation of an improvement plan. I want to mention about the survey of victimization and security perception of 2011. These are the survey modules for households, for individuals. These are the major results. We see the prevalence of crime to people. 17 of every 100 people have been victim of certain crime. This is the prevalence of crime in houses. 4 out of 100 have been victims of robberies. People that report type of crime in 80.4% is a hidden figure of the crime. 84% are reports about the total vehicle robbery, then 24% for dwellings, and 48% for kidnapping. And among the cases why the crimes are not reported is that 29.9% of people that were victims of any crime did not report it because they do not trust in the judicial system. So knowing that they don't trust the system and they don't trust police, move INEC to find better practices to improve those figures. How unsafe do you feel? And the results. When I want to talk about the challenges that we have, I will mention just one because I want to conclude. This is like the big challenge in our work at the Commission. The next one is to build a statistical system which is comprehensive by means of traceability and interoperability of security system. Will be chaired by the President of the Commission, which is the Ministry for Coordination of Security, and INEC will have to coordinate among all institutions, applying statistical standards and promoting the quality of data. So in the end of the day, we would like to have a system that will allow us to have information about crimes, victims, the criminal, and their characteristics. Data on the prosecutor's office, police, courts, prisons. So basically, we would like to have a comprehensive overview of all of data on security, and this is what we're working at the Commission. Well, this has been the presentation by INEC from Ecuador. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Veronica. I think our next speaker is Giuseppina Mortore from Italy, and she'll describe the efforts of the Italian Statistical Agency.
Thank you very much to the Center of Excellence and to INECI. It is a very, very marvelous conference from several points of view, the professional, the accuracy, and so many things. And many things, thanks also for the possibility to be here with you. What I want to present now, it's the contribution of the ISTAT. It is the Italian National Statistical Office in building up a crime statistical systems. Even if this is a very, very big work, and also the work itself, the crime statistical systems is really something that is very huge, too much comprehensive, but this is the idea that we are on the process, even if a lot of obstacles. What we do? Mainly, we do this is the things that we do, and we analyze. I will show you in a more deep way. The ISTAT contribution is a collector of new needs, a stimulus in improving a new and better statistics, data producer, an active entity in data analysis and dissemination, a stimulus for other agencies, coordinator of other agencies involved in a topic, and try to do this work in coordination with the international organization and international UN guidelines and Eurostat guidelines. Just to start, there is the demand and supply of statistical information. So first of all, I want to put the stress, the attention to this part regarding the needs identification. The input that come out from the community are very, very important. And they come from outside the statistical system, the stakeholders and users, and can be journalists, experts, or university academics, or citizens, and all the public institutions, the parliament, the governments, and so on. There is another part of needs that emerge from the statistical system. Already, my colleague from Peru and Ecuador already they speak about these statistical systems. That means that every kind of institution has a statistical office. They have a part in the statistical system. This is the statistical authority. And this is a specific one regarding justice and crime and safety. And we meet each year, we plan together the statistics, and at the same time we do the suppliers and what we do, and also we collect the demand. But recently we have a more specific organization for the demand that is organized by ISTAT. We call CUIS, that is the Users Committee for Statistical Information. And also the demand that comes inside from ISTAT, because you know very well that when you study topics, you go in depth and you discover much more needs. And then the output. It's for sure that include, as you well know, also the sensitive topics. I want to stress this because as statistical office, it's not quite common to look at that. Perhaps in Latin America, yes, but in Northern Europe, or in other countries, it's not so easy to think that in Eastern Europe, that is not so easy to address sensitive topics, as a crime, as a violence. So there is not this culture, and this is very important to think that we can to do it. After the needs identification, we go toward the understanding of which are the gap identification, because perhaps sometimes there are already the suppliers in some parts in other institutions. So it's very good not to duplicate the information, but to look at what there is already, and if it is, or if it is good or it had to be improved in the solution. So it means that ISTAT plays a good role, an important role in doing this, in finding solution, not necessarily implementing, but also the national statistical system involved in justice and crimes. And there is a continuous interchange between the two parts. The idea is looking at effectiveness. Just to give you an example of what I mean, recently there was an important need regarding health condition of prisoners. Till 2010, it was a competence of administrative penitentiary, this is the Ministry of Justice. But since 2010, this competence of health in prisons is of Ministry of Health and of regions. These are local competencies, health in Italy. So there were no more information. And the Minister of Justice was asking us to create as a link in order to having again information that were only at only for health and not for statistics. So this is the reason for which we established the group with the Minister of Justice, Health Regions, as is a little, it's not explaining in English, sorry, I can't. It's something that the little unit of a sanitary local and us. And we are starting to identify which are really the needs and which are the solutions. So perhaps we will do a survey on health and quality life in prisons directly, ISTAT and the prisons, the Department of Justice, and sometimes to create a flow of administrative data, because there are a lot of information that are not systematized, but there can be many files to put together to have information, perhaps not that they give other information, very useful, always regarding prisoners. Another aspect, for instance, I don't know if you know that in Italy there is a well-being report. One domain is justice, is safety. And one of the problems is that the committee wanted to put indicators on corruption, but there aren't, because record statistics are not good for corruption. It is a high unreported phenomenon. So we decided to start to put a module on corruption in our victimization survey. Another example, perhaps in future we will do something regarding in order to estimate the GDP part from illegal activity, we wanted to estimate prostitutions or something that is linked to it. I don't know if from the demand of the suppliers. This is a really high challenge, but I don't know what we do, but this is our idea. And next steps, have you seen yesterday, Roberta Barletta presented data regarding violence against women, but we need a survey regarding violence stereotypes on men and women to understand which is the changing in the cultures. Only in this way we can understand what is changing and what not. And also we work with other agencies to look for harmonization. This is a really high need regarding harmonization. And this aspect about international crime classification system is a very good thing where we are working together with the other Ministry, Interior and Justice. ISTAT as a data producer about microdata. So we work about the victimization survey, both sides, subjective, I mean fear of crime, worry of crime, social decay, and objective side, obviously. Violence against women survey, module on corruption, module on sexual harassment and sexual blackmail at work. And for the first time this year, sexual harassment is also for men. There is also a module on access to civil justice and citizen satisfaction that can be useful, perhaps, to understand something about rules of law. And we have the survey, I can say, data collection from the prosecutor offices, because they send us all the data every month, every quarterly, and we can analyze proceedings, perpetrators, and crimes. And we have also in-house court statistics, and we can work on convicted crimes, sentences, the length of the process, and so on. While from the data analysis point of view, the other ones, we have the microdata, so we can really go in depth regarding analysis and so on, and we can also assure the quality of the data because we do the check of every file, also data from prosecution or data office from proceedings. Then we have data from the police, so we deliver data regarding victims, perpetrators, and crimes, and adult in prison, juvenile in prison, homicide data. That is very important because it's a dedicated database in which there is, that is of the Ministry of Interior, obviously, and in which there is the victim-perpetrator relationship. That is just the first step to understand something more regarding femicide. And we have this particular analysis regarding safety and well-being. From the analysis point of view, we create some, how to say, we have the idea to create some report that go in depth on some thematics. So for instance, for prisoner statistics, we work with the penitentiary department, looking at the different approach, not of organization, but much more on the sociological, the social point of view. So it's the same data that they publish, but we look at them in a different way. We try to give a much more complex framework that is behind the data. And also different kind of thematic reports on different sources. I want to say you that we are working also on sources integration of data. This is the case of the well-being statistics, in which we merge data, we use data to give the indicators of a police statistics and victimization survey data. This is like a ponderation in the calculation. And we do statistical matching between the prosecution and the court files. Because they are not linked. Nobody in Italy has, I know that some of you has, I saw in these days these very good things. But unluckily in Italy, nobody has the link between how start a report, the prosecution, and the different level in the course, the final course. So we have the final course data and the prosecution, the beginning. And we try to link with some, thanks to certain variables, to do some statistical matching. And we experimented corruption. It was very, very interesting. As a coordinator, this is an example from Violence Against Women framework. It's something you already know because yesterday we spoke about it, that from the violence, sexual violence results, violence against women results, it was a very, very big effect on the media and for the politicians. And they also, from the legislative point of view, there is the stalking law in 2009, and also this task force started to work. And there is also a task force on data. And this is very good, and ISTAT coordinated it. And at the end, they give input for policies, and they have to be mandatory for the different institutions. So it's very good in order to design prevention and protection policies. So the idea is that it's not really, it's important to have, for instance, violence against women survey, but it's not important alone, because it really, to give the accuracy data, we have also to have a better framework with annual data or every 4 years data for instance, for violence against women survey, and to look at something that is comprehensive, periodically updated, that is a storage for data, micro, macro, and also metadata and reporting analysis. It is very useful for policies. The last point regards the stimulus for other agencies. So we work with a lot of agencies, and we work regarding information enrichment and quality improvement. This is our main goals when we work with them. But there are some problems. For instance, very often in some statistics, there isn't the victims, the gender of the victims, or there are many missing values. So we are trying to learn how quality is important in their statistics. Or for instance, every one of us has a different definition for crime or different classification. So we're trying to do, as I told you before, a group that work on STCS. So at the end, we also tend to standardize the definition. And there is no longitudinal data, and we are trying to push in order to have also this one. But it's a long, long way. So, in conclusion, ISTAT plays the role of a collector of new statistics, demand coming from stakeholders and users in general. Considering that stakeholders are involved also at the beginning when we plan survey, that is for victimization survey, for corruption, for violence against women survey, we made a lot of focus group with the NGO, with the experts, with the victims, in order to share the knowledge. Then ISTAT produces and disseminates crime and justice statistics. I didn't use any kind of feedback regarding them, but they are on the ISTAT website, even if it's not very good. Sorry to say this. And ISTAT works with other agencies. But to achieve the goals, the statistical sensibility has to be still improved, and the process is long and slow, because generally when we work with a lot of ministries, we know that they do very well their work from an operative point of view, but not from a statistical point of view. So this is very difficult to push to the statistical approach, to underline the importance of these, also for the operative issues. So what we need is an improvement of the statistical culture on crime and just topics, to clearing out of the hurdles that are different kinds and the resources, including financial and human resources that work on it, and the development of a new culture regarding sources integration from both administrative and survey data. And this is what we do. Okay.
Thank you, Josefina. And last but not least, Mario Palma, who will speak about the activities at INEGI.
No sé si está fallando algo en la presentación. ¿Lo pueden poner, por favor?
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the conference and for resisting up to today, the last day of the conference. It's a pleasure to see so many people. Slides will be in English, but I will give my presentation in Spanish. I have to apologize with the translator because I might be changing languages. More than see data, more than telling you how you do things in Mexico, the discussion will be which is the role of the national statistical offices. My friends in INEGI, in UNODC, we have gone around the world by preaching and trying to say that national statistical office should measure and because they had to be involved, had to measure these three topics, but this is not something that will happen by itself. If National Statistical Office does not solve a certain number of problems, beginning by the quality of statistics and going with the credibility and independence, they are not going to measure them, and they are going to be replaced by the other institutions, or simply no one will take care of that job, which is another institute problem. The third issue that maybe we're going to talk about an ideal world, sounds an ideal, but it's a possible world, and I will give you some examples. The problem begins because traditionally the statistical offices were not used to measure these issues. And this is surprising because their mission has always been to provide information about social, economical phenomena to the society. And those three, if they are not relevant, I don't know which will be relevant. On top of that, we have reached the ODS, the SDGs, especially SDG number 16 that you have seen in other conferences. That's a progress because in the Millennium Goals, some of the issues were not mentioned. That's such a good progress. But then we went to the other end with a lot of enthusiasm, and we included many, many topics and indicators. And after the party, the question is, with the hangover, who is going to measure them? How are we going to measure them? I don't know if some of them could be measurable from a statistical standpoint. For example, prevalence on the right. Well, just to have an example, corruption on the right. These are probably easier to measure, but how many countries do have information about that? How many countries have official data, and who can measure those issues? Statistical Office, of course, then maybe ONGs or some other institution might measure them, but not at the world level. I'm not against having that, of course, but I know there are several agencies, but not always we are up to standards. We may talk about these issues without having a victimization survey in households. We know that even the most advanced country, the black figure is around 60%, Mexico around 90%. If we don't have a good victimization survey, do we know where we are, or we are blind and trying to find data? We have corruption surveys, not only corruption perception. Do we have a good survey telling us about experiences of corruption? That's another question. No, do we have to report them as official figures? Are states going to report figures produced by a private institution? Is that possible? These are the questions we have to take into account. Well, these are the questions. It's obvious that administrative records are not enough, which is the role of national statistical officers then. They have a mission: provide quality information on relevant social and economic phenomena. In theory, they have to have technical expertise and operational infrastructure to carry out this type of surveys. But why most of them are not measuring certain things? Because the fear of course, crime is justifiable to fear crime, but here we are talking a fear to measure crime, which is different. It's because they don't have money, enough budget. My experience with statistical office is this: always they have a good pretext. I don't have money. I don't have resources. Money doesn't come from the clear blue sky. You have to justify a budget, and therefore you have to provide, to offer something to the society. And this is the core point. Statistical officers have many challenges. There are many technological changes. What are we going to do with the big data? In Latin America, we have some other problems. For example, secure a sufficient budget. If we don't have sufficient budget, we don't have operational capability. You cannot recruit talented people. But why we do not have enough budget? Why we have these problems? This is the non-relevance of statistical offices, and this is a sin which is corrected with the contrary. What do we have to do to have relevance? We have to provide valuable information for the users. And who will assign the budgets? Well, the Minister of Finance, right? If it is the Minister of Finance, if that minister does not feel that a statistical officer will have the capacity to provide something of value, will never give enough resources. The statistical office has the obligation of changing a vicious circle into a virtuous circle. Not all will the government see the need of having good statistics, but this is what National Statistical Office has to defend. Another important thing should be autonomy derived from the quality and freedom from political interference. How we can guarantee that government is not going to change it and to modify the statistics? The statistical office has to impose their technical autonomy, and they have to have a legal autonomy, and they respect quality, and they have proven that they are autonomous over time. But that's important, and this autonomy is not happening from overnight. Someone has to do something in that respect. What is being measured in Mexico? But I have to say that seems to be many things, but 7-8 years ago that will be reduced to almost nothing. We had the gender violence surveys, homicide statistics, some other administrative records, and that's it. That's an important issue to mention. We have developed census from administrative records that were helpful to involve government offices. I have to mention two items that were very good. We do have legal autonomy. That's good to have it and not to have it. But some countries legally, the law does not allow that autonomy. So what we have to do is to set up a quality that is respected in the country. And then it's important the international support that we have, especially at the beginning with UNODC. These are sensitive issues. Many times governments do not like these issues. We try to convince the government that the first interested in knowing the truth should be the government. Normally a minister or an attorney general that thinks twice before producing information. The first thing that we tell them, the first people that will tell you lies will be your subordinates at your own office, because they are not doing their job. So it is convenient for you, Mr. Minister, to have an autonomous office giving you real information. I will mention two examples. It was key in our development. The victimization in households survey. INEGI did not do that. In 2002, they suggested INEGI to have that survey, but they started to do. One NGO was not doing it very well, but finally INEGI was invited to take part in the survey. We had several problems because our condition was that we had to revise the methodological part. They did not comply with that, and therefore it was not a good experience. Next year, the government, because it was paid by the government, was part of the INEGI budget, and the government proposed us, INEGI, to carry out that survey. Of course, we were accused of trying to protect the government, but when the results came out, the prevalence of crime was double than the government figures. It's not a political issue. The survey was not a good one, so we clearly started from that. In the methodological facts, we established the legal autonomy of INEGI, but also on practical grounds, and this is what happened. There's a big amount of things we are going to have. Besides that, we are going to have prison surveys and also impact of regulation on business, and the conclusions are always the same. The statistical offices have the obligation of reporting relevant social phenomena. They have to do it with high-quality information and credible information with independence. People cannot be, you cannot tell lies to the people. You have to provide good quality data. We have to follow good methodology. We need international cooperation because it's very important in delicate issues like Center of Excellence. They do have a role, especially in Latin America, to help this type of surveys. Then we have to use some framework like international crime classification. And then, in the end of the day, why do we have a statistical office? To provide information that will contribute to solve the big issues of the social policy of a country. And we go back to the main original topic. Why are we here? Which are our obligations and functions? Thank you very much. Pleasure to see you again.
Gracias, Mario. I have to apologize to both Josefina and Mario because I was more strict with them in terms of time because my watch broke and I was able to borrow one and I could enforce the rules at the end, but not in the beginning. So, but thank you all for very exciting presentations. What strikes me as most exciting about what you've described is the system component to it, so that crime is a phenomena that gets processed by many agencies. There are many hands in the response to crime. And what I noticed in all of your presentations is that you are attempting to put that system together. That you are getting all the actors and all the stages, and you're bringing that information to bear on this issue, which is very exciting, I think, and also gives me a sense of that's something that statistical agencies are accustomed to doing, is to treating this like a system, a bunch of interrelated data collections. The problem I see with this is that in many cases you are now moving into cooperation with agencies and coordination, and you're obtaining and using data that you don't own. So customarily, you're used to owning the data that you use. You collect it. Now you're coordinating more, you're harmonizing more. And so my question to you is, what strategies do you have to affect that cooperation and coordination? So if you're going to make data reach a certain quality, you're going to have to be able to identify errors in other agencies' data and get them to fix it, which is an interesting problem. So what strategies have you used, Annabel, to get that coordination among the agencies?
Well, let me start with these final considerations. I would like to highlight two areas. I believe that Dr. Palma has somehow expressed them, but one of them is credibility of the national statistical offices. when I'm referring basically to the Peruvian case, the credibility that we have achieved throughout the last 10 years has allowed the government itself to invite the National Statistical Office to the NSO in Peru to lead this integration process, to lead this coordination among the different sectors, the standardization process in the collection and production of statistical data. That is a core issue. 3 years ago, we created the Interinstitutional Statistical Committee of Crime that involved all stakeholders. That in itself was a relevant step. But that took place given the fact that the statistics that were collected and reflecting the situation of the country were certainly distorting the reality. The homicide index went up overnight without the fact that we didn't even have a war in Peru nor a conflict in Peru, in moments where we had economic growth, social peace, yet the figures of homicide just duplicated themselves. And there was a time where they tripled or went four times up. So actually, that called for the need of conducting a reviewing, coordinated process. That, I believe, has been an important step forward. We also have the issue of what are statistics for? What are they used for? Well, for decision-making, of course. And in Peru, we have taken an important step. A major part of the public budget is directed to results. So it's results-oriented. So there are budgetary constraints that group indicators that have to be permanently followed up and monitored. And well, the Ministry of Economy and Finances is the one that allocates resources. And it has been the Statistics National Institute that has been working not by itself, but together with the Ministry of Economics and all of the different sectors involved within collection of statistics. In the case of citizens' security, with the national police, with other factors. That's why we got all this allocation of funds for the commissariat census and for all the penitentiary center census. So this is a multi-purpose survey where we have a citizens module present. Now we have a commitment of the government of having a victimization survey that will help us in achieving this process. And a third point is the initiative as an element that interacts with the National Statistical Office. And this is to have related information where all the database will be in a specific repository of the public prosecutors, the household surveys, and also the automatized cartography that we have at the NSO in Peru that will be available for all users. The decision makers, the ones that correlate the data, the ones that use this data. So I think that we are moving along this path. And even more, international coordination. I believe that the advances of the ICCS with statistical purposes have been a critical step forward that we are adopting and adapting to our own reality in a process where we will be able to integrate the international perspective regarding this particular problem.
Veronica, your experience in this?
I only would like to share with you in regards to your question that the fact of having this working group, which is within the Commission, is quite helpful because in Ecuador, prior to 2010, it was very difficult to have harmonized figures, as I shared with you in my presentation. The police was giving us some estimates of reports of crime generated regarding the cases that came to the knowledge of the police, but also the Justice Department had different figures. So to coordinate the different institutions, though they work within the same sector that has to do with the common goal of improving the security perspective of the citizens of Ecuador, when we have created this commission and we sat around the same table, the public prosecutors, the law enforcement agents that haven't been very friendly, at least in Ecuador. But to manage that we will all be heading in the same direction through this working commission has been that we have scored a great point in doing this by working together. It helps us to create our figures, and now the vision that we have shared with you of the different institutions in our government and that have shown their support is the initiative of the Security Coordinating Ministry that is working with the interoperability and trackability of the different systems. So we're not just keeping the figures, but carrying out an analysis and look at the whole process. Since there is a reported crime, if someone has been arrested, goes through a rehab process, and then once they're back to the labor market, we can follow up the whole process and have an analysis that goes beyond the points that we had and allows the decision makers how we can improve their policies and improve also the security feelings among the whole
I'm going to change the question a bit because I have gotten a much better phrasing of the question from someone in the audience. I think that he says, we have seen cases or countries where coordination among data producers and crime statistics is regulated by the law, and in others it is based on, quote, soft arrangements. Can you see pros and cons in the two approaches? And Juicy first, and then Mario.
Thank you. Well, I think that if there is a law, it can be a support. It can help, sure. But the law is not enough because, for instance, we have a law that from the end of the 90s that regulates this, the partnership also, the statistical system, but it's not enough. And it's very important also to be very credible and authoritative, and also be available to do works for others. Because a lot of works that we done is shared with the partners. And just to have just only example, the dictionary of all the crime, all the law, we do it, and then we do to the different department of Ministry of Justice, and they use, and they also have helped us to construct it. So, but it is a continuous partnership that works on the basis, on the base, and also in then in the high level.
Mario?
Sí, gracias.
Very good question, and yes, it goes to the core of the problem of how to work together with other institutions that normally have no trust in the statistical offices. For example, when we go to the Statistical Commission in New York, have a different DNA than the Crime Commission in Mexico. The only exception here is the UNODC and ourselves, actually, more or less. So in my personal opinion, we must follow both paths. It's better to have the legal part that will assist us to have a call in relation to a particular act, but this is never enough unless you have the soft approach, as it was posted in the question. The other area will not work. We must be fully aware of this. And this is a work that involves patience, and in English, I think the word is cunning. So I think that we have a situation that we have to be careful about. So what must be present at the end? Well, something that will be ideal for the other institutions. We have to provide them information that will be useful, that is not something that they didn't have and could not reach in any other way. and patience. This must be done little by little. You have heard this anecdote. The first time we conducted a census with the Attorney General's offices, 5 or 6 of them said, I don't want to give any information, so the press will not be attacking us with the same information. And yes, it is a slower presentation. You have to let them know the profile of your position implies that you will be attacked under any circumstances. You want to be attacked through anecdotes or made-up stories, or have the real information to be able to react before you're attacked. I think the answer is obvious, but you need to explain this very slowly. I have related to you how the census has worked for us. A lot of people would say, why census you're collecting administrative records information, but if I make a census, a survey, and then I take it to the attorney generals, to the chief justices of the high courts in the state. This is the dictionary one. Check it. Look at the questions that you consider that are missing and that you need for information. After several years, this procedure does work. We have been operating this for 5 years with this census with the attorney generals, and people are extremely happy. And I'm talking about the attorney generals of the different states. They're making proposals. They find it interesting. There's no way back here. This is something that is fully established now. Thank you so
Mario.
much.
It's, I think we're going to make somebody unhappy here because we're out of time. But I have these very good questions here, so I'm going to ask one more. And so let the people who are outside get mad at us. I'll blame it on Mario. He's or something. So this is a question that follows up on Mario's point, and then I just say, how can we encourage policy decision makers to use data for deciding what to do, where, and when? Annabel?
Disculpe, ¿podría repetir la pregunta?
How can we encourage policy decision makers to use data for deciding what to do, where, and when?
I think the answer has been given already by Dr. Palma. You know, they have to follow this information for decision-making processes. And those that are the decision makers, the budgetary allocations, they do know that the information given to them is somehow showing the fact that this public investment is having good outcomes, of course, and of course they will be supporting the statistical works. And this is an example of what has happened in the Peruvian case. The budget based upon results that was implemented 8 years ago in Peru is based upon the constant follow-up of a group of budgetary programs funded with public money. Those sectors that are not moving forward, and to have an effective reaction of reducing the social problem, will have lesser resources. And if you're moving forward, obviously you have more resources. So the indicator that comes out of the census and the surveys is quite useful. That is the great motivation that decision makers have in this regard.
Veronica, you have the last word on that same question, if you'd like. Would you like me to repeat it, or is...
In regards to your question, I believe that to motivate the decision makers of policies to use the figures within our commission, we have different institutions that are called to create public policies, like the Ministry of the Interior, the National Agency of Justice. So they create a joint work. They can see how the figures are reached. They take the statistical information for the assessment, follow-up, and monitoring of public policies. So the fact of having consensus information, validated and quality data is highly motivating to have reliable figures that will allow them to reach a good public policy. We have seen through sharing the figures that we work with at the Commission, this is taken to sectorial cabinets chaired by the President of Ecuador. They realize the work done by the police, by the public prosecutors, so somehow the idea is shared about the scenario and the figures and how they are managed, how they're operating. So the Commission provides a tool, an instrument, the necessary materials to launch actions within the field of the police, within the field of the military staff, or any other staff that are involved in improving the citizen safety.
Thank you, Veronica, and thank you all for your sharing your experience and wisdom, and thank you, too, for your participation. And thanks to Enrico for his watch. It's